When we are in self-beratement, our perspective gets narrow, and honestly, it gets selfish because we're so busy inventorying what's wrong with us rather than remembering we are a creation of divine source. And so the second being I met, I call my royal shepherd. And so his presence was pure peace. His greatest quality was generosity. And he touched his forehead to mine in my death experience. And I could see as he sees, which is that we are all interconnected in this grand living matrix of life.
You talked about this great shepherd, and I have a feeling a lot of people are wondering if that is Jesus. Who do you feel that shepherd was? This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Welcome back, everybody. This is part 2 with Robin Landsong. Hello, Robin.
Hi.
Your story is so moving. As I mentioned in part 1, it's really one of the most profound NDEs I've ever heard, along with a story that is deeply moving. You grew up in an abusive environment, and then you were abducted by somebody and literally taken out of the United States into Rhodesia, where the Rhodesian War was taking place. So this is in Africa, completely foreign to you. And so many things happened to you. For those of you listening, please at some point listen to part 1. I will have a link in the description, but there is so much more that I want to cover right now. You met many beings during your near-death experience, and a couple of those beings that you initially met, what kind of a sense of feeling did you get from them? Or, did you feel love? How did it compare to earthly interactions, that sort of thing?
So the first two beings, it took me years to understand this, but it was the two women in the village who were caring for me. But that's who I met when I first crossed over. And I didn't recognize them because it was a younger version of them, which is quite common in near-death experiences. And so they were still alive when I crossed over in my first death experience. So isn't that interesting?
Yes.
And then when the attack happened and the massacre, I believe, as best as I can understand, both of them did cross over in that experience. And so, so that brings up a lot of questions about what is time, how much of us is already on the other side. If they were still alive when I crossed and wouldn't die 2 days later, then, why were they the ones there to greet me? And so the next being I call my royal shepherd. And I very purposely keep all the telling from my 8-year-old perspective and not my kind of updated adult perspective, because I believe, I just want to deliver it as I experienced it without interpretation, that our adult mind does. And so the second being I met, I call my royal shepherd. And I meditate quite frequently. I meditate like 30 minutes to an hour and a half a day. And I invite him to reside in my heart. And because I meditate so much, I can just even do that right now. And so his presence was pure peace. His greatest quality was generosity. And he touched his forehead to mine in my death experience. And I could see as he sees, which is that we are all interconnected in this grand living matrix of life. And that when we shine, when we show up, when we are courageous enough to not play small, but play our true divine source creation in our body, then we light up the matrix. And we might be serving people we've never even met. And, at different times, sometimes I struggle to meditate, and sometimes my meditation feels like there is no more Robin. It's just divine source presence. And I'll have people message me, from the internet, from my YouTube channel, from my Facebook, and say, I can feel God inside you. And I think, that was my morning meditation, and you can feel that. So there's another near-deather that his experience was the beings told him, when you're collapsed into self-deprecation, self-beratement, it impacts the web of life. And so that's one of my things I love to teach in my classes is shifting self-beratement over to self-kindness, over to self-compassion, so that we can not only have a better quality of life, a better state of mind ourselves, because when we are in self-beratement, our perspective gets narrow, and honestly, it gets selfish because we're so busy inventorying what's wrong with us rather than remembering we are a creation of divine source, and that even if we make mistakes, even if we have a choice that is a learning experience, that we're still always connected to divine source. And I want to take this point home a little bit more. Like when I'm going to go up on a stage to speak, it's not about me. So I'm not nervous. It's about divine source coming through me to speak what is needed to each person in the audience. So I just was at an integrative wellness conference with lots of doctors and healthcare people who are doing great work in the world. And I stand in the back of the room and I look at every single person in the audience and I say, what do you need to hear from divine source today? Let that come through me. And then I go up on the stage and again, I'm not nervous because it's not about Robin. Robin's not even there anymore. Like, I'm the one that gets divine source up to the stage. So I just want everybody to practice that in your life. When you are nervous about presenting something, just let it be of service coming through you. And then who cares if you stumble a little bit? It just makes you more relatable to people. So again, that my royal shepherd really instilled that in me of being of service actually makes our experience in this lifetime gentler and easier, because the synchronicity of what we might need to say. I think there's a beautiful phrase I learned from Course in Miracles, and see if I remember this correctly. Where would you have me go? To whom would you have me speak? And what would you have me say? And so it's just a lovely prayer, again, to get us beyond our agenda, beyond our perception of, I need this, I want this, but how can I serve?
That's such a great message. And I think it's one that so many people need, because so many people have been wounded and they still carry it around, and they kind of take over what other people were doing to wound them. They start to do it to themselves. And it really, I think, will be very helpful for people to hear that. You talked about this great shepherd, and I have a feeling a lot of people are wondering if that is Jesus. Who do you feel that shepherd was?
Mm-hmm. Again, this editor I had, he was raised Christian. I was not raised Christian, and he read this section and he said, describe more. Like, what did his face look like? Did he have anything with him? What was he wearing? And I said, well, he had kind of a narrow face and a beard, and he had a robe on that was like kind of felted wool. And I said, and he had a sheepherder staff. And he looked at me and he said, the Lord is my shepherd. And I was like, oh, oh, oh. So I actually didn't get it, because I truly just had that child perspective of not having an agenda of this meeting any particular religious idea. And so I'm Buddhist who has a strong relationship with Jesus. And so what I want to emphasize is, if certain religious ideas are taking you away from your direct connection to Jesus, to divine source, if that's narrowing down these concepts and belief, what Jesus wants is a direct connection to you, despite whatever labels, despite whatever limitations are there, it's a direct connection. And he has a really great sense of humor in my experience.
I love when you say Jesus has a sense of humor, because I've heard that actually from many people that have had an interaction. One thing, though, unfortunately, is I think a lot of people, the minute you say, in addition to Jesus, you say Shiva. I think in your book, you also mention the mother of creation. People have a hard time because it doesn't fit with their current beliefs. So, can you help make it a little bit easier for people to understand?
Mm-hmm. So I think the key thing that is a primal need for so many people, all of us, is belonging. And so there are many organizations, gatherings, communities that meet a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of something meaningful. And the problem happens if there's rules or norms in that group that take away your own sense of self, your own inner authority. And so historically, there's been many examples of like women who were singing at a funeral, and they were stopped and told only the religious authority can be the one that speaks at this ceremony. And so again, my invitation is to return back to our direct connection with divine source. So if there's a religion that's telling you that your body is innately problematic, that your body is innately sinful, that your movement, you're being connected to your own sense of breath, is ultimately taking away authority from kind of the hierarchical structure, then I believe that's worth questioning. Because are they really having your wholeness, your fulfillment, your direct divine connection in mind? Or are they more focused on serving the hierarchy of the group and in certain ways controlling beliefs, controlling outcomes, controlling, whatever methodologies they're using? I just feel moved to sing to that. Honoring your boundaries, honoring the movement and breath in your body. Shomneaheyam, oh way I am no amneahi im nayam ne am oh way ho. Coming home to your strength, coming home to your dignity, coming home to your right to say no in all the variations. That is not selfish. That is caring for the divine source inside your body and saying, this gem of divine source is worthy of safety, is worthy of belonging, a place where you don't need to be suppressed in order to be accepted and in order to get along with others, because we need each other to be our whole selves. So that's one of my big messages.
It's also with smaller things, you said in part one, too, just, you have to choose whether to be true to yourself or true to your family sometimes. And sometimes as people listen to messages like yours, they do want to branch out from their beliefs that they grew up with. And, it's nice to kind of hear permission from someone like you for people that are struggling with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I left home at 19 and never went back.
In your book, you describe some of the challenges that you faced in your own home too. And so again, wonderful story for people that need some inspiration. You mentioned that during your near-death experience, you were able to see into the future. It was just a few days, but you understood that these people that had so beautifully taken you in were going to get slaughtered. Does that mean that the future is planned out? Or do we is there flexibility in what lies ahead?
Hmm. That's a really great question. And I know that there's some people who their intuition is stronger in future prediction. That's not the strongest area of my intuition. Like sometimes I will get things, but my intuition really works in people's health. So um, the way I'm able to see is I'm able to see when I have permission and I'm up for it, that I see inside people's bodies and I see down to the cellular level. I can sometimes see down to the DNA level. And so I see structures, I see brain, I see spine, I see vertebrae, I see organ function, and I see underlying cause of how people's emotional history might be sitting upon people's health expression. So where is the distress? Where is the strength? Because it's good to ask both. I don't just go look for pathology. I also look for dignity. I also look for resilience. And, and so sometimes I'll see people and I will get a prediction of a future diagnosis. But I'm also mostly listening to this present moment of their health of expression and how can they course correct to not get that diagnosis. So is the future set or is it variable? And so again, when I'm giving sessions with people, I might see something and I'll say, this is a potentiality, which I believe we make choices all the time of which direction am I going to go. So I believe there's multiple potentialities and that it's not so much about kind of grabbing for what we want. I'm not a huge fan of some of the manifestation programs because they get a little too emphasized on like, I know the best way. I'm like, ooh, boy, I don't know the best way. I don't know what difficulty might open me up to a new path and direction. I don't know that, my something disappointing happened might turn me this direction and I can be of service in a greater way to somebody or somebody can be of service to me. So I don't like the idea of like controlling my future based on my wants. I do like the idea of cultivating my presence and awareness and mindfulness so that I can pay attention to the choices that are actually there. And again, I'm a huge fan of cleaning up your diet, cleaning up how much time we spend on screens, how much time we spend just scrolling, because that decreases our mindfulness. And and so every single thing we can do to get embodied and present, I think is investing in a future that we can respond to in a good way. And one of my project managers, she said to me, Robin, your ability to adapt to what's happening is your greatest strength. And so if I try something and it doesn't work and it's kind of an epic fail, take a deep breath, begin again. And so that to me is the best way to there's a great phrase from Thich Nhat Hanh, the best way to take care of the future is the present moment. And by that, he meant instead of grasping for the future, which is very easy to do, I catch myself doing it all the time, or reliving the past over and over again, which can be an aspect of post-traumatic stress, to get into that present moment. What is it like to breathe in, pause, and breathe out? Pause, and then do it again. And so I'm a huge fan of meditation, breath practices, yoga, tai chi, qigong, all those things that get us in this present moment, because the research on our brain shows the magnitude of how much that increases our brain health to do any of these mindfulness practices.
That is such an important message for so many of us. And I also wanted to mention that in your book, you talked more about how you could see in people's heart. And that was really an interesting thing to me. You also mentioned in the book that when you were in the midst of your near-death experience and your African mother was crying over you and singing and trying to call you back, you wanted her to know that you were okay. And so, do you have a message to people that have lost somebody they love? Because so many people are worried about somebody who has left this world?
What a great question. And and so again, when people cross over, even if they're going to have to review something challenging in their life, they're still held. And and so even my research into other people's near-death experiences that go through a difficult realm, they're still guided. And so it's, again, it's not always about avoiding difficulty or having everything just be perfect heaven. It's about how much can I be present with this spectrum of experience, both here in this human lifetime and when we cross over. And so I'll remind people of or kind of open up a part of my near-death experience. One of the beings I met that I still don't actually have a name for. He was an old man who presented as very, very old, but he was incredibly strong. And so he took me through my dark cave. And so some people might consider that a hell realm. I kind of jokingly call it a sauna because, when we get in a sauna, it's about purification of that which is no longer serving us in our body. And so he was right there with me as I was having to deal with my repressed emotion. And again, I was 8 years old and I had experienced very extreme abuse up to that point. And so I couldn't keep crossing over and going home to divine source with all that repressed, difficult emotion and with the belief that it was my fault. Because children will internalize, make the adults right, and make themselves wrong. And so he was helping me see the abuse that happened to me wasn't a problem with something I was doing. It was the confusion of the adults who were doing the abuse. And so that was a key purification in that dark cave that I needed to go through and realize before I could go to the next level. So again, all these beautiful practices here in this lifetime, receiving sessions from people that you trust, going to retreats and workshops that help you in your transformation, help you in your growth. Because healing is not a solo journey. And especially if we do have a history of abuse, the abuse happened in the context of human relationship. Healing also can happen in the context of human relationship, as well as horse therapy, as well as cuddling up with your kitty, as well as being in relationship to the land. Those are all healing presences when we approach it that way.
You also mentioned in your book about people holding themselves from what many would call the light, or you called it, I believe, the web of life.
Okay, so reviewing that moment where I had the choice, and I call the divine source the great heart. And so I was ready to merge into the great heart. And it was that moment of hearing my mama call on the ancestors and her singing, and they reminded me I hadn't done my purpose. So even though my soul knew it was going to be difficult to come back here, and it is, it's a very dense plane here. And I chose to come back to sing to people. And I want to add something to like once I finished my book, I actually went into quite a depression because I had done one of my divine assignments. Like, boom, like what had been motivating, it was 16 years writing that book and recording the audiobook. And so it's very common that once you actually do one of your big life missions, that's called post-achievement depression. So I just want to say that to like fill out all the positive I'm saying. It has been rough because I just finished my book. What are we on? Like 3 weeks now. And so fortunately I just prayed and prayed and I said, Shiva, what is my next assignment? I need a next, something to lean into. And so had meditated and emptied myself. And I was not in meditation. I was just walking across the kitchen to start making breakfast. And Shiva gave me my instructions and said, you're still the storyteller. It's just now time to tell a different story.
And you tell your story so beautifully. And I know that it touches so many people. I know that people that are listening right now are going to want to connect with you. They're going to want to read or listen to your book. Um, can you just share with people how they can make a connection?
Yeah. So the book is out in all the forms, ebook, physical book, and audiobook. And I narrated and sang on the audiobook. The physical book has my art and it has 18 of my drawings and then photographs of the return trip. So that's on Amazon, Audibles, Barnes and Noble, iTunes, all the places that you can buy books. And to connect with me and my work, I've got classes. I have a couple free classes that I do, Nurture Your Nervous System. And then I started doing this recently where I meditate during the class and I transmit the love I received during my death experience. So I do those about monthly. And the Nurture Your Nervous System is how to calm down, how to come home, how to drop into the mindfulness I've been speaking of. I teach classes on generational trauma healing, how to move from self-beratement to self-compassion. I teach classes on creativity, because that's the beauty of doing trauma resolution work is I am literally unstoppable creativity. Like sometimes I just tire myself out and it just keeps the drawings keep coming through. I have hundreds of drawings. So one of my next projects is going to be to make an art deck that goes with my book. And I have more singing medicine out. I have a music album out called Roots Drinking Rain. That's on Spotify, on my website, which is robinlandsong.com. So it's my name.com. Currently I do individual sessions, and then I do 5-person groups, which are my absolute favorite because so often we need to heal in community. And many people are lonely on their own journey because they're not witnessing other people's healing process. So people might think it's less privacy, but I work with each person for about 10 minutes, and you get to be in community of others who are devoted or just starting out on their healing journey, whatever that is about, whether physical health, emotional, spiritual health, creative health. And so magic happens every time in those 5-person groups. And some people are kind of unsure, like, I don't want to tell my story in front of other people, but I hold a really safe container. And people are always glad that they joined in on that. So again, that's through my website, which is my name, robinlandsong.com. And if you're in the beginning of your journey, if you're further in your journey, you're all welcome.
I know a lot of people are going to be definitely heading to your website, and I've enjoyed your audiobook so much. I'm still partway through it, but you just have such a soothing, calming voice as well as a beautiful singing voice. And so it's really been comforting to listen to it despite the challenges that you talk about, but it's just so inspiring. Speaking of inspiring, not to put you on the spot, but do you have any just parting words of maybe wisdom that you can share with the people that are listening?
Well, what I'm wondering is if I can sing specifically to you.
Absolutely. I would love that.
Yeah, because I do my best singing when it's really focused. So each time I've been
Okay.
singing, I've been focusing on the people who are going to listen to this. And so let me do one for you, Heather, and just really drop in and just see what you notice in your body. See what, sometimes people see colors or little images or little movies. If they're more visual and if they're more kinesthetic, they might feel sensation in their body. Shayam Showeo Yam Nayam Ayayo Heya Yao Heya Ya He Heya Yam Ayayo.
Thank you. That
Mm-hmm.
was absolutely beautiful. And thank
Mm-hmm.
you so much for sharing your story today. I can't tell you how much I have enjoyed just hearing your story as well as your inspiration. You had so much valuable advice that you were able to share today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I love being of service. It brings me such great joy. And sometimes people are like, oh, are you tired out from your work? I'm like, no, I'm actually enlivened from my work. And because I'm doing what Creator designed me to do.
I love that. Thank you so much, Robin, for being here today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching through to the end. Not everybody sticks around through the whole thing, and I sometimes feel like they miss out on some of the best stuff. So I appreciate you being here, and I would love to know what you thought about Robin's story, about some of the things that she shared now, just some of her messages, some of her inspiration. So just jot that down in the comments. And as always, if you just want to say you've made it, I do really appreciate that too. It means a lot to me. Your likes also mean a lot. And thank you to all of you who are subscribing, and keep checking to make sure that you are subscribed, because some people are saying that they're getting unsubscribed for some reason, and I'm not exactly sure why. I do appreciate those of you that keep coming back and watching again and again my podcast. I so appreciate it. You mean a lot to me. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. If you'd like to watch more episodes, I always have links to that in my playlist. And again, just most importantly, thank you for being here right now. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.